Welcome to a deep dive into the iconic 1972 thriller Deliverance. Let's jump right into 20 fascinating facts about this film, each explored in more depth to reveal the behind-the-scenes drama, the wild decisions, and the unforgettable moments that shaped one of the greatest survival stories in cinema history. Stick around until the end, because I'll have a quick sign-off inviting you to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Let's begin. James Dickey's claim it was all true. One of the most tantalizing stories about Deliverance is the bold assertion by its author and screenwriter, James Dickey, that the entire tale sprang directly from his personal life experiences. When Dickey first met director John Boorman, he dramatically leaned in and confided, "Everything in that book happened to me." This admission set the stage for a film that many assumed was at least partly a true story. However, as production advanced, the cast and crew discovered that Dickey's actual life did not entirely align with his grandiose claims. In fact, his time in the military was quite different from what he publicly boasted. While he declared himself a daring fighter pilot, records revealed he served as a radar operator and navigator instead. Dickey's flair for myth-making didn't stop there. On set, he would expound elaborate survival tips, telling everyone how to brave the wilderness, as though he had spent half his life fending off bears and canoeing through raging rapids. His suggestions, although often impractical, added tension and some unexpected comedic moments. Members of the crew would trade wary glances whenever he launched into yet another outlandish anecdote about his fearless pursuits in the wild. Nonetheless, Dickey's outsized personality and conviction fueled the film's creative energy. Even if the more perilous facts of his life were embroidered at best, his willingness to present himself as a hard-bitten outdoorsman lent Deliverance a unique tone. There's something undeniably compelling about an author so fiercely convinced or determined to convince others of his own legend. In many ways, this blurred line between truth and fiction perfectly set the stage for a movie that plays with how quickly illusions of civilized life can unravel in the face of nature's harsh realities. Characters as Dickey's alter egos, James Dickey's personality looms so large over Deliverance that it's no surprise each character seems to echo a different sliver of his psyche. When you break down the four main characters, Ed, Lewis, Bobby, and Drew, they almost feel like pieces of a larger puzzle, with each man symbolizing a specific facet of Dickey's life or imagination. Ed, for example, works in advertising. That lines up with Dickey's real-world experience in the ad industry before he fully embraced the literary life. Ed is the observer, somewhat cautious, often hesitant, and initially unsure of himself when pitted against life and death stakes. Meanwhile, the rugged Lewis carries the novels and film's spirit of rugged survivalism. Dickey longed to portray himself as that powerful, fearless outdoorsman, always ready to spear a fish with a bow or conquer a raging river. It's the side of Dickey that he most wished to embody and that he projected to those around him, even if some details were exaggerated. Then there's Drew, who stands for the creative, artistic impulse Dickey nurtured throughout his poetry and prose. Soft-spoken and musical, Drew's sensitivity contrasts sharply with Lewis's machismo. Finally, Bobby's brashness and slightly abrasive edge hint at Dickey's own combative nature, as he was known for clashing with people on set. By distributing these qualities across four characters, Dickey shaped a story that pulls viewers in multiple directions emotionally. We're watching the conflicting sides of one man's self-image colliding in a wilderness adventure that demands each side either prove itself or face annihilation. That's part of Deliverance's timeless tension, and ironically, it's also a reflection of the novel's complex, self-styled author. Star-studded names turned it down, Before Deliverance landed its final cast, John Boorman and the producers had initially chased after some heavyweight talents. Marlon Brando, Charlton Heston, Jack Nicholson, and Donald Sutherland were all approached. You can imagine each of them embodying the roles of Ed, Lewis, Bobby, or Drew, either swaggering like Brando as Lewis or letting Nicholson's tension bubble to the surface as Ed. But ultimately, each of these major stars said no thanks, albeit for different reasons. Some simply found the material too grim. They balked at the disturbing violence, the raw depiction of nature's fury, or the rough and isolated filming conditions. Sutherland reportedly wasn't keen on a project that would demand so much time immersed in the wilderness. Some of these actors might have also been juggling other films, preferring more comfortable shoots or bigger paychecks. Indeed, Deliverance was made on a shoestring budget, around $2 million, which was modest even for the early 1970s, so it couldn't promise top-tier Hollywood salaries. Ironically, their refusals became a hidden blessing. Forced to cast lesser-known talents, Boorman ended up with what many consider a perfect ensemble: Jon Voight, Burt Reynolds, Ned Beatty, and Ronny Cox. Their relatively modest fame at the time allowed audiences to see them as four everymen, making the story feel more authentic rather than a star vehicle. That sense of realism intensified when the actors later performed many of their own dangerous stunts. Had the film included a cavalcade of huge Hollywood names, the gritty tension might have dissolved under the glow of celebrity. Sometimes, rejection by iconic stars opens the door to an even more compelling cinematic experience. A shoestring budget and real stunts. Once Deliverance started rolling with its smaller budget, director John Boorman made an audacious decision. The actors would do the majority of their own stunts, no matter how hair-raising. With only about $2 million in funds, the production didn't have much wiggle room for expensive stunt doubles, elaborate harness systems, or special effects. Yet Boorman's reasoning went beyond pure economics. He believed that if a scene was perilous enough to demand specialized professionals, perhaps it was too perilous to shoot in the first place, or else it should be real enough for the primary actors to handle. So Jon Voight, Burt Reynolds, Ned Beatty, and Ronny Cox found themselves navigating wild, churning rapids in canoes and scrambling up jagged cliffs without the luxury of safety nets. In one hair-raising example, Voight climbed a rock face unaided, receiving only minimal guidance. The cast and crew alike watched with bated breath. If anything had gone wrong, the film's entire shooting schedule, and quite possibly someone's health, would have been in severe jeopardy. Naturally, this approach sparked anxiety. None of the four actors were trained stuntmen, and the swirling waters of the Chattooga River were infamous for sudden whirlpools. Yet the payoff was enormous in terms of cinematic authenticity. Audiences could sense the raw fear in the actors' performances. There was no faking the adrenaline surging through them. This ethos of live, the danger, became part of the film's DNA, creating scenes that remain riveting to this day. Sure, it was a risky gamble, but it's also a key reason Deliverance has such a lasting reputation as an unvarnished, nerve-wracking portrayal of survival against ferocious odds. Burt Reynolds' waterfall wager. While the entire cast took risks, Burt Reynolds' most dramatic gamble centered on a waterfall scene. Deliverance called for his character Lewis to plunge over the rushing falls in a canoe. Originally, Boorman planned to rely on a dummy, an approach typical of the era, to ensure no one got hurt if the canoe capsized violently. However, when Reynolds got a look at the stand-in, he deemed it laughably unrealistic. The last thing he wanted was for moviegoers to roll their eyes at a rag doll flopping over the falls. So, in a burst of gung-ho enthusiasm, Reynolds volunteered to do the stunt himself. He soon learned why the dummy had looked so unconvincing, because the stunt was truly perilous. The moment Reynolds and his canoe toppled over the edge, he was at the mercy of powerful water and unyielding rocks below. The impact left him with a broken coccyx, a jarring injury that would have many actors sidelined for weeks. When he asked Boorman how it all looked on camera, the director supposedly replied, "It looked like a dummy falling off a waterfall." That wry response could have come straight out of a dark comedy. Nonetheless, Reynolds survived the ordeal, albeit with considerable pain, and the footage found its way into the final cut. Fans marveled at the authenticity of the waterfall scene, never suspecting that the real human body flailing in the rapids was just inches away from serious harm. It epitomized Deliverance's approach, raw, uncompromising, and sometimes punishingly real. The gamble may have cost Reynolds physically, but it underscored his commitment to making this tense, unfiltered classic resonate on screens forever. Boorman's son and DICKEY'S cameo director John Boorman had his own family footprints embedded in Deliverance. His 6-year-old son, Charlie Boorman, made a minor cameo as Jon Voight's on-screen child. This moment marked young Charlie's official film debut, setting him on a path that would later include roles in Excalibur and The Emerald Forest, also directed by his father. Eventually, Charlie carved out a unique career hosting global travel documentaries, alongside Ewan McGregor, offering a stark contrast to his cameo in one of cinema's most harrowing tales. But the familial connections didn't stop there. James Dickey, the writer whose novel formed the backbone of Deliverance, snagged his own moment in front of the camera. He appears as the local sheriff in the final act, a fitting cameo, given the large role he played in shaping the entire narrative. While Dickey's presence was overshadowed by tales of his confrontations with Boorman and others on set, the author's physical insertion into the story underscores how deeply he considered this film an extension of himself. Ironically, having him play the sheriff, an emblem of order and authority in a film about lawlessness in nature, brought a wry sense of symmetry, considering that Dickey's on-set behavior was anything but orderly. In these cameo roles, both Boorman's child and the larger-than-life Dickey exemplify the unusual personal investments threaded throughout Deliverance. Their small appearances resonate for fans who look for meta layers in film. Just as the men on their doomed river expedition brought personal baggage, so too did the creators of Deliverance, weaving their own lives right into the fabric of the movie. Burt Reynolds' Cosmopolitan controversy. While Burt Reynolds was busy breaking bones on set, he was also stirring up controversy off-screen with his now infamous nude photo shoot for Cosmopolitan magazine. The revealing centerfold featuring Reynolds in a playful yet suggestive pose hit stands right around the same time as Deliverance's release, grabbing widespread attention, and not all of it was positive. Conservative elements of the entertainment industry found the photos distasteful, questioning whether an actor who posed nude could be taken seriously in a tense survival-themed film. Reynolds later expressed regret, claiming the provocative photographs cost Deliverance key accolades. Indeed, the film was nominated for 3 Academy Awards, Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Film Editing, yet lost out in all categories. Reynolds believed that this was partly due to Hollywood voters reacting negatively to the publicity around his nude spread. He felt they were reluctant to reward a project so closely associated with that risque shot, especially at a time when the Academy still clung to more traditional values. Whether or not the photo shoot truly impacted Oscar decisions remains a subject of debate among film historians. What's undeniable is that Reynolds' Cosmopolitan feature overshadowed the conversation around his performance in the movie, at least for a while. Over time, though, The centerfold has taken on a kitschy sort of legend, while Deliverance itself endures as a gritty masterpiece. Reynolds might have wrestled with regrets, but he also gained iconic status, both as the hunky rebel who posed nude for Cosmopolitan and the fearless actor who risked everything on the Chattooga River .8 Dueling Banjos and its legal battle. When anyone brings up Deliverance, the first sound that usually echoes through their mind is the twangy, toe-tapping riff of Dueling Banjos. That musical motif practically became the film's trademark, underscoring the tension between the city slickers and the backwoods locals. However, this now iconic tune plunged Warner Brothers into a thorny legal dispute. The composer, Arthur Guitar Boogie Smith, wasn't initially credited. Furious about the oversight, Smith filed a lawsuit for credit and royalties. He had good reason. The track shot to popularity with a lightning strike, blaring from radio stations nationwide and forever, imprinting itself on pop culture. Without recognition, Smith stood to lose not only financially, but also in terms of artistic legacy. Ultimately, he won his suit, ensuring his name was added to all future distributions and pocketing well-deserved royalties. In an almost cinematic twist, the gold record Smith received for the song was later stolen by an infamous Dublin criminal named Martin Cahill. John Boorman would famously direct a film titled The General, 1998, dramatizing Cahill's life, and included a scene depicting the theft of Smith's Dueling Banjos gold record, bringing the bizarre circle full round. Even Jon Voight had a co-starring role in The General, quietly linking back to Deliverance. Talk about life imitating art, imitating life. It's fascinating how a simple two-instrument duel grew into something that bridged multiple film productions, real-world crimes, and a protracted legal fight over creative credit. For fans of the movie, Dueling Banjos remains an indispensable piece of its haunting, unforgettable atmosphere. Billy Redden and locals as extras. Part of what makes Deliverance feel authentic is the presence of real locals from the rural South as background actors. One of these individuals was Billy Redden, who portrayed the eerie banjo-playing boy in an early scene that still raises the hair on viewers' necks. Billy's distinctive look made that musical duel with Ronnie Cox an unforgettable cinematic moment. But interestingly, Billy did not actually play the banjo. Instead, his arm positioning was obscured by clever camera work, and a more skilled child musician performed off-camera. Director John Boorman was determined to capture the rough, unpolished reality of the film's setting, so he also hired other locals to fill in as townspeople, patrolmen, and other small roles. Some of these individuals brought their own natural, sometimes abrasive personalities to the set. This decision lent the film an almost documentary-like feel at times, pulling audiences deeper into the sense that these city men had truly intruded into a corner of America untouched by modern niceties. At the same time, the shoot was occasionally marked by cultural clashes. Actors from Hollywood and more urban backgrounds were thrust into an environment with different norms and rhythms, leading to misunderstandings, comedic episodes, and sometimes uneasy relationships. Boorman, for his part, embraced the tension, believing that the cast's discomfort in real life heightened their characters' disorientation on screen. Billy Redden's role in particular stands as a testament to that mission. His haunting stare and physical presence embodied a region shaped by its own traditions, secrets, and deeply ingrained codes of survival. Point 10 Dickey and Boorman's explosive showdown. The tension between author James Dickey and director John Boorman simmered from the moment the cameras rolled. While Dickey's writing brought the story to life, he also held fervent opinions on how every line, every action should unfold on screen. Boorman naturally sought the creative freedom to make the film he envisioned. As friction built, the two men locked horns over script edits and scene directions. The most notorious clash came when Boorman drastically trimmed Dickey's first 19 pages. Dickey flew into a rage, reportedly accusing Boorman of gutting the soul of his masterpiece. Witnesses claimed the shouting escalated into a physical confrontation culminating in Dickey striking Boorman. Depending on which account you believe, Boorman ended up with a broken nose or some damaged teeth or both. Whatever the case, the outburst was severe enough that Dickey was effectively banned from the set for a while. To complicate matters, Dickey wasn't satisfied to nurse his wounds quietly. He allegedly badgered the actors with unsolicited tips on how to handle the rapids or which line deliveries captured the true spirit of the novel. The fiasco highlighted the double-edged sword of having a highly invested author on site. On one hand, Dickey's passion for authenticity added depth. On the other, his intensity and refusal to compromise ignited countless sparks. Yet, Hollywood being Hollywood, they patched things up enough for Dickey to return for his cameo as the sheriff. It's a testament to the film's raw spirit that even real-life fisticuffs found their way into its lore, fueling its reputation as a production fraught with the same primal energy it depicted on screen. Squeal like a pig, improvised, mentioned Deliverance. And chances are, the first phrase people recall is that spine-chilling command, squeal like a pig. It's become a cultural shorthand for one of the most horrifying cinematic assaults ever filmed. The phrase was not in James Dickey's original script. Instead, it emerged spontaneously on set, possibly from actor Ned Beatty, director John Boorman, or another crew member. Accounts differ. All we know for sure is that this improvised line was so disturbingly effective that it instantly lodged itself in the public consciousness. Adding to the scene's raw power is the fact that it happens during an unthinkable act of violence. It exposes the vulnerability of Bobby Beatty in a manner rarely depicted so starkly on screen at the time. To intensify the shock, Boorman decided to keep the line in the theatrical version, rather than reserve it for a possible TV broadcast edit. Thus, the terror was uncut and in full force for audiences. Within days of release, Squeal Like a Pig became the chilling takeaway that people whispered about as they left the theater. Many tried to rationalize their discomfort by framing the line as a metaphor or a stand-in for the deeper fear of losing one's humanity. However you interpret it, the improvised phrase amplified the film's primal dread. It's a stark reminder that, even with a meticulously planned script, sometimes the most unforgettable movie moments arise in the heat of filming, born from an intersection of cast, setting, and raw terror that can't be replicated by rehearsals alone. Bill McKinn, and the method to terrorize Ned Beatty. Delivering one of the most unsettling moments in Deliverance, actor Bill McKinn, credited as Bill McKinney, played the sinister mountain man whose menacing presence escalates into the film's infamous assault scene. To capture the raw fear needed for that sequence, McKinn supposedly took advice from actor Bruce Dern, who believed that terrorizing your co-stars for real could yield a powerfully authentic performance on camera. McKinn took this method approach to heart by quietly stalking Ned Beatty off camera. He'd give Beatty prolonged, intense stares and make cryptic remarks about his own capacity for violence. Anytime Beatty tried to relax or slip into casual conversation, McKinn stayed fully in character, radiating hostility. Beatty later admitted he felt genuinely uncomfortable, even fearful, around McKinn during those days of shooting. That sense of dread seeps into the final product. Bobby's expressions and body language convey real alarm. Boorman, initially unsure about pushing boundaries, came to view this method acting as weirdly effective. Had the actors been chummy, the scene might not have carried the same chilling weight. McKinn's dedication extended beyond psychological tactics. He painstakingly practiced controlling his breathing and posture for moments when he had to appear predator-like but oddly silent. This commitment, while frightening to coworkers, paid off in a sequence that's etched in cinematic history for its unflinching brutality. Indeed, Deliverance fans still debate the ethical implications of method acting to that extreme. But there's no denying the result, a performance that remains disturbingly unforgettable. 13. Holding his breath, McKinn's eerie stillness. Bill McKinney didn't just rely on psychological intimidation to bring the mountain man to life. He also employed a remarkable level of physical discipline. The film's pivotal scene where Burt Reynolds, shoots the mountain man with an arrow required McKinn to appear dead on the ground, not breathing or blinking for an extended period. He reportedly trained himself to hold his breath for up to 2 minutes to make the shot unnervingly authentic. In a production devoid of modern CGI wizardry, such feats were achieved the old-fashioned way, through personal endurance. John Boorman was reportedly stunned by McKinn's ability to remain utterly still. The camera lingered on his expressionless face longer than typical for a death scene, adding a haunting after effect. Viewers felt compelled to watch closely, waiting to see if he'd move. This extended shot hammered home the finality of the kill, serving as a grim punctuation mark in a film where moral clarity is disturbingly absent. Adding to the creepiness, McKinn lay partly buried among dirt and leaves, letting nature claim his character's remains. Shooting such a scene on location with the heat, humidity, and possible bugs crawling around further tested his resolve. McKinn's discipline epitomizes the fierce dedication shared by many on the Deliverance set. Actors, director, and crew committed to realism, even if it veered into discomfort. It's a telling reflection of why the film endures. It's not sanitized Hollywood heroics. It's an unblinking gaze at primal violence, made all the more real by a performer who could hold his breath and never blink through the final shot. The dangerous Chattooga River. For all its picturesque beauty, the Chattooga River is notoriously volatile, with powerful currents capable of upending even experienced rafters. Director John Boorman, determined to showcase nature's indifference to human frailty, selected this very stretch of water in Georgia and the Carolinas to test his actor's mettle. Classified as one of the most challenging whitewater runs in the United States, the Chattooga demanded constant vigilance, especially since the movie's budget constraints required the principal cast to navigate the rapids themselves. Although the cast received some training, real-life hazards loomed around every bend. Sudden whirlpools could drag a canoe under in seconds, hidden rocks threatened to overturn rafts, and swirling eddies could trap unsuspecting swimmers. Local rescue teams and a skeleton safety crew remained on standby, but the inherent risk far exceeded what you'd see in a typical studio production. Ironically, Deliverance's success made the Chattooga River a magnet for thrill seekers, many of whom overestimated their skills. Reports of inexperienced adventurers flocking to replicate the film's adrenaline rush grew common, leading to tragic accidents and even fatalities. In a grim echo of the film's storyline, where city dwellers wander into unforgiving wilds, tourists discovered too late that the river did not care about their bravado. For Boorman, capturing this primal power on film was worth the logistical nightmares and moral questions around subjecting actors to such peril. The Chattooga's swirling intensity bled into every shot, amplifying the existential dread. This synergy between the real and the fictional forms a hallmark of Deliverance, the sense that nature, while majestic, can also be mercilessly destructive, indifferent to human drama unfolding on its banks. 15. Near-death encounters. Ned Beatty's Whirlpool. No matter how well prepared you are, the Chattooga River has a way of surprising even the most vigilant. Ned Beatty learned this the hard way when he was yanked into a sudden whirlpool. According to set anecdotes, Beatty vanished beneath the surface for around 30 seconds, an eternity when you're fighting a swirling current. Panic rippled through the crew. Several people scrambled to reach him, uncertain if they'd be retrieving a man or a tragedy in the making. Finally, a quick-thinking production assistant managed to grab him, and Beatty surfaced coughing and gasping but alive. Shaken though he was, Beatty reportedly kept his sense of humor, remarking that Boorman probably would have completed the film without him if he'd drowned. Still, the incident underscored just how little separated these actors from catastrophic outcomes. Everyone was constantly aware that a moment's inattention could lead to real injury or worse. It also reinforced Boorman's reputation for pushing boundaries. After all, the director had insisted on putting the cast in genuine peril for the sake of authenticity. Beatty's near-death experience resonated throughout the rest of the shoot, adding tension to even the calmer scenes. Cast members realized that any one of them could be next. This real-life brush with disaster paralleled the film's central themes. Underestimating nature can prove fatal, and survival can hinge on split-second decisions. In some twisted way, the genuine terror Beatty felt fed back into his performance, heightening the sense that the characters on screen were contending with more than a stage threat. They were battling a river that held no illusions about their star status. Boorman's desaturated palette. You might imagine that a lush river gorge would pop in vibrant greens and blues on screen, but John Boorman took a different path for the visual style of Deliverance. He wanted to capture the grim undercurrent that runs throughout the story, so he chose to desaturate the color, muting the forest's natural radiance. By reducing brightness and contrast, the river's beauty transforms into a cold, almost alien force. Leaves that should dazzle in sunlight appear more foreboding than inviting, reflecting the characters' psychological states as they descend deeper into their nightmare. To achieve this washed-out effect, Boorman worked closely with cinematographer VILMOS ZSIGMOND, who had gained a reputation for filming under challenging conditions. ZSIGMOND brought with him the gritty realism honed from his earlier experiences filming amidst conflict zones, such as capturing footage during the Soviet invasion of Hungary. That background gave him a knack for raw, documentary-style visuals, which perfectly aligned with Boorman's aim for Deliverance, a film that felt unsettlingly real. The choice to strip away color wasn't merely an aesthetic flourish, it was a narrative statement. By making the environment look stark and uninviting, Boorman underscored the men's precarious situation. The wilderness, drained of idyllic vibrancy, becomes more ominous and indifferent, a silent antagonist looming over every frantic paddle stroke. This tonal bleakness foreshadows the moral and physical decline the group experiences. Nature isn't just a backdrop, it's an ever-present character, rendered all the more menacing by the deliberate omission of its usual lush splendor. VILMOS ZSIGMOND'S hard-won realism. Cinematographer VILMOS ZSIGMOND was instrumental in shaping Deliverance's iconic look, going above and beyond to immerse viewers in a raw, unvarnished portrayal of wilderness survival. Having honed his craft under the most extreme conditions, such as filming real-life upheavals in Eastern Europe, ZSIGMOND seemed to relish Deliverance's physical and creative demands. His lens captured both the dynamic whitewater action and the quiet, creeping dread that permeates the calmer stretches of river. One of his key techniques involved natural lighting whenever possible. This meant the cast might wait patiently for the sun to cast just the right shadows, or rush to catch the day's last golden hues. The result is a visual texture that feels almost documentary-like, free from the artificial polish of studio spotlights. Zsigmond deliberately avoided modern cinematic comforts. If a shot appeared too crisp, he would adjust angles or lighting to maintain the film's subdued aesthetic. Another piece of his artistry lay in the rhythmic way he contrasted wide shots with claustrophobic close-ups. One moment you see the vast, daunting wilderness stretching out endlessly. Next, you're uncomfortably close to a terrified face, reinforcing how small and isolated these men truly are. Under Zsigmond's watchful eye, every reflection on the water's surface and every shaft of sunlight piercing the canopy told part of the film's emotional story. His commitment paid off enormously in critical acclaim, even if the Oscars that year eluded Deliverance. Long afterward, Zsigmond cited the film as one of his career highlights, crediting its rough-edged demands for helping him push cinematic boundaries. Thanks to him, Deliverance doesn't just show men battling nature, it drops us into the boat with them, all but feeling the river's current beneath our own feet, drifting downstream. Unlike many Hollywood productions that have an army of crew members standing just outside the camera's frame, Deliverance often had to strip down to the essentials. When filming the canoe sequences on the Chattooga River, director John Boorman and cinematographer VILMOS ZSIGMOND would hop onto an inflatable raft or small dinghy, drifting ahead or behind the actors, while much of the primary film crew remained elsewhere. This minimalist approach served multiple purposes. First, it reduced the risk of having a large group of people out on turbulent waters. Second, it preserved the sense of isolation that the story demanded. Boorman and ZSIGMOND could capture raw, unmediated reactions from the cast, who were genuinely paddling through tricky stretches of river without a dozen onlookers shouting directions from a stable bank. Communication became a series of shouted instructions over the roar of rapids or prearranged signals whenever the group needed to regroup downstream. The inherent chaos mirrored the film's survival narrative, forcing the actors to handle real improvisations if someone lost control of a paddle or nearly tipped the canoe. Any mishap might end up in the final cut, lending the finished scenes an unpredictable, almost documentary-like vibe. Furthermore, the isolation encouraged the actors to remain more in character. With no massive set entourage, they had to rely on their own instincts and each other's teamwork. While unorthodox, it proved to be one of the production's smartest moves, capturing the unfiltered tension of four men battling a river, and metaphorically, their own illusions about control in a harsh, uncaring world. The filmed but unused alternative ending showed Ed, Jon Voight, dreaming of a scene in which he, Lewis, and Bobby encounter the sheriff, who has uncovered a body. The sheriff reveals the corpse, but before viewers can see whether it's Drew, the mountain man, or another individual, Ed wakes abruptly, leaving the question unanswered. This ambiguous moment would have extended the film's central theme, survival at the cost of moral clarity. The cameo in this scene was played by Christopher Dickey, James Dickey's 20-year-old son, who later became a notable journalist. Christopher Dickey's involvement went deeper than just a cameo. He eventually penned a memoir titled Summer of Deliverance, dissecting both his relationship with his father and his experiences during the shoot. Through Christopher's lens, we gain insight into James Dickey's complex personality, his passion, his fabrications, and the magnetism he brought to the film's genesis. The choice to scrap the alternate ending underscores the delicate balancing act of giving an audience closure without undermining the film's foreboding aura. Boorman decided the nightmare of the hand bursting from the water was a more potent final note, an inescapable ghost from the river refusing to let Ed and the audience truly forget. Yet the alternate ending remains a fascinating what-if, a glimpse into how the film could have played its last sinister trick on the viewers, leaving the question of who truly lay beneath those waters unresolved, haunting both Ed's dreams and our own. Inspired endings, CARRIE and horror tropes. The final shot of Deliverance, with a dead hand rising from the water in Ed's nightmare, left a lasting impression not just on audiences, but also on fellow directors. In particular, John Boorman's friend Brian De Palma was so taken with the eerie idea of a sudden, shocking reappearance of the dead that he employed a similar device for the end of CARRIE, 1976. In De Palma's adaptation of Stephen King's novel, Carrie's hand emerges from her grave in a dream sequence, jolting viewers with an unexpected scare that has since become a staple of horror film endings. This cross-pollination between Boorman and De Palma symbolized how Deliverance helped reshape cinematic language in the early 1970s. Beyond just being a survival thriller, it demonstrated how a jarring nightmare epilogue could linger in viewers' minds long after the credits rolled, blurring the lines between reality and subconscious terror. Other films in the horror and thriller genres picked up on the motif as well, creating a wave of gotcha endings that lured audiences into a moment of calm before ripping away any sense of safety. For Boorman, the ending also reiterated the psychological scars haunting Ed. Surviving physically doesn't guarantee emotional closure. A reanimated hand from the depths signifies the guilt, regret, and darkness that remain. The fact that this coda influenced a mainstream horror classic like CARRIE shows Deliverance's far-reaching impact. It wasn't just a one-off depiction of men versus nature. It served as a blueprint for how nightmares, be they literal or symbolic, could add resonance and dread, shaping cinematic storytelling for decades to come. Thank you for sticking around through these 20 intense stories behind Deliverance. If you found this deep dive entertaining or learned something new, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with fellow movie buffs, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And of course, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss my next exploration into the world of film. Until next time.